So I will call the meeting to order, and if we could please have the roll call.
Yes, Chair Martinez Beltran,
Here.
Vice Chair Meadows.
By the skin of my teeth, here. Here, we saw you.
Awesome. Director Scozola.
Here.
Tyson.
Here.
Malia.
Here.
Fine.
Here.
Thank you. All members are present.
All right, thank you. So we'll move for public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. Do we have any public comment?
None in the room, but we do have one virtually. Bruce Carney.
Good morning, Bruce. We will go ahead
Good
and
morning.
public comment. We've got 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. So last Tuesday, the Mountain View City Council voted to adopt its priorities for the next 2 years. And I'm very happy to let you know that one of the ones that was unanimously adopted was to develop a plan to end the flow of piped natural gas no later than 2045 in Mountain View. And so by doing that, we're following in the footsteps of Los Altos Hills and Half Moon Bay. And we got more than 20 individually written letters to the City Council requesting that they make that policy decision. And now, of course, we have 20 years to figure out how to actually accomplish the very heavy lift of ending the flow of piped natural gas. So one of the things I wanted to mention today is, 2 ideas for raising money to, particularly in Mountain View with all of the rent control departments, to help the owners of those buildings who otherwise would not be able to recoup the investment to break even or do even better. So one of the ideas is a voluntary carbon tax, which can also be seen as an education program around where people's carbon footprint comes from. This is a notion I've been kicking around for at least 5 years. And in essence, it would be like asking for a charitable donation. There would be no requirement, even though it's framed as a carbon tax. Residents and businesses would be given some sort of simple worksheet to calculate their carbon footprint, and then a suggested price, carbon price per ton, that if they wanted to, they could voluntarily submit payment for that amount, which would go into a fund that would be used to help electrify multifamily units. I'm guessing that such a thing might be able to raise $1 to $2 million a year in Mountain View, but I could certainly use some outreach help from SVCE staff to do some polling to try to understand the degree to which customers in Mountain View or elsewhere would support something like that. The other idea is similar to a Roth IRA, where people would be able to put money aside into a fund where it could grow tax-free and be restricted to use it when they actually did an electrification project. To sweeten the pot, the City of Mountain View or SVCE could partially match the money put into this Roth IRA type vehicle, maybe at a 5 to 10% level. So just wanted to share those thoughts. I'll continue to work on them and look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we will move to the consent calendar, which is action to approve the minutes. If I could get a motion in a second.
Yep. Take public comment.
We have more public comment?
On the consent calendar.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so can we take, do we have public comment on the consent?
No hands raised. Chair.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and close that. And get a.
Tyson moves.
Great.
Second by Klein.
Thank you. All right. Do we need to do?
Yeah, no roll call needed.
Perfect.
Okay, call the
All
question.
those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and with that, we'll move to the regular calendar. So this will be the CEO update, and since we don't have Monica today, we're lucky to have Amrit. So we'd love to have her report.
Thank you, Chair. So as you know, Monica is out today, but she left me a nice note. So I have some news to share.
All right.
At SVC, we're very excited. As you know, we're purchasing a building, our new headquarters. So we were successful. Earlier this month, we closed on the building. I think some of you may have already seen it.
Yeah. You have all the
It's-
stuff.
it's-
Yeah.
It's a big building. It's about 28,000 square feet. So we're all very excited. It's more than enough to accommodate staff, our boardroom. We're gonna have some on-site storage. And then we will still have some space left over for some community needs. So the next stage now is we're hiring a project manager to help the interior design, get us ready to move in. And one thing Monica wanted to share is that before the March board meeting, there's an opportunity for board members to come in and take a look at the building. So we'll set that up. I think we sent out an RFP, consultant for in-house project manager. And the proposals are due on the 26th. I think Zoe's leading that effort on our behalf here. So again, thanks to everyone at the SVCE team. This was a lot of work on top of what we were already doing, in particular to Mike Callahan and Karen Chang, who's to led the effort and supported by many people on the team here. Next, she wanted to share about the regionalization and expanded market bills, but I'm going to turn it over to Benna, who's an expert on this.
Very quickly, we're very excited that Senator Becker has introduced SB 540. This is a bill that SVCE has been very interested in supporting for a while, and it would actually allow the expansion of some very key regional energy markets that will help just with the system and allow us to better and more easily sell some of the solar that has been curtailed during the day here in the state to other states, and then to more easily buy, for example, wind that is produced in the evening hours when we need that electricity. So SVCE is taking a look at doing a support position. This is a bill that Cal CCA has supported as well. I wanted to bring that up with all of you.
Thank you. Thanks, Benna.
Thank you.
I have an off-topic question for Benna.
Sure.
Yesterday at my environmental initiatives meeting, I heard that there was a bill out there that would ban reach codes in light of the Palisades fire and rebuilding. And I thought, what the heck? I gotta ask Benna, and what better time than now?
That's okay with me.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I would love to hear about that. Thank you for bringing that up.
So one of our highest priority bills right now, it's AB 306 by Speaker Rivas and Assemblymember Schultz. And staff has actually been working really hard on this bill and has had meetings with Assemblymember Schultz to talk about their intent. We think there's actually a lot of alignment on intent, and we're working very closely with them now to potentially suggest some amendments to that bill to make it clearer what they're trying to do. So happy to chat more with you if you have any questions.
Yeah, what are
Oh,
they
yeah,
willing
sorry.
to do? What is the big surprise?
Yeah, so this is part of a package of bills that the legislative leadership really wants to advance to help support the rebuilding after the LA wildfires. And so on the face of it, what the bill would do is to put a pause on state building code changes, and then also put some new restrictions on local governments that want to adopt reach codes on top of that state building code. So right now, the bill says that if a jurisdiction had a reach code before January 1st of this year, they would be able to grandfather that reach code in. So a lot of our questions with the authors of the bill have been around, what exactly is your intent on doing this? Let's tell you the things that we're doing in our service territory to really advance reach codes and see if we can work out some compromise language that will allow us to continue doing the good work that we're doing at SVCE.
Is there any type of sunset on this?
It's for 6 years.
It's for 6 years.
That's right.
So essentially it would be a freeze
That's
of
right.
reach codes from January 1st, 2025 for the next 6 years.
That's right.
Wow, okay.
So working very hard on this.
And
So yeah, please.
yeah, it would be a little bit after January 2025. The newest code, which you've all been talking about a lot, because this is very confusing in the language, would still be adopted. So it would be a pause after this most recent building code
I see.
is adopted. Yeah, and the timing of the language is clear. It's also focused on new construction, not really existing. And so that's one of the areas of clarity that we're working to get.
Thank you, Zoe.
And do we know, sorry, that's the question I think we'll We need to move unless anybody else has something, but
I have a
Okay.
very quick one.
let me
Follow-up.
just ask this one. Does that mean as far as, what we foresee happening with BACMed, will that just go?
No.
Okay, so that would still be addressed?
Yep, that's it, because that is through the Clean Air Act, and so it's a
Okay.
totally different
Separate,
big
got it.
path, but yeah, great question.
Dr. Wall. Dr. Walden. Can you tell I have to make my doctor appointment today? That's hilarious.
Herbal tea, a prescription from Mint Anna, so I also understand that SVCE is working with Peninsula Clean Energy to talk about reach codes and reach out to the audiences. Can you touch upon that?
Yeah, that's actually a Zoe question.
Yeah, so we're continuing to our collaboration, we have shared technical support with PCE. And because this will be the building code cycle this year, you all know we have individual action plans. But we're also thinking of putting together an event in June. We usually do one each year with all elected officials to do broader coordination and update everybody beyond our selective boards about the options and actions and the benefits and answer questions that folks might have.
Okay.
You have a
I
date?
think that will be great, and to bring all the elected officials, as many as are interested from both the counties together. And the earlier you decide upon a date and
Yeah.
time would be helpful, because our schedules are just all over the
Not good.
place.
Okay, I'm gonna, I'll send that email, right, we'll pick a time frame.
Thank you so much, Zoe.
A Thursday evening.
I would suggest that we invite the speaker to that event.
Yes, that's a
So
great
I'd be
idea.
happy to
Thank
ask
you.
them to come to that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just a couple more items.
Yeah.
So just a reminder, the quarterly impact report on Monday, we sent that out to all of you, your city managers and city council colleagues. This summarizes basically some of the direct benefits the communities received over the past year. This includes bill savings, number of households we served, and the rebates received. And lastly, there's some upcoming event reminders. On March 21st, we have the Berkeley Power Conference. This is, SVC is a sponsor, and we do have 4 available spots for that. So let us know if you're interested. Then on April 17th, we have the Hanford Gas Peaker and Battery Ribbon Cutting. And then April 28th to 30th, we have the annual Cal CCA conference in Arizona. And that concludes the report. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Omrit. I did see that article on our new building, so that was exciting. And we saw Director Klein in there. That was fantastic. A lot of people excited about that. And I also wanted to thank staff for everything that they've been doing on that. And then the impact post, thank you for putting that out. I got the little nuggets for us and put that on social media. So that might be a good thing if we're all sharing that to let everybody know how much everyone's saving. Okay, number 3, we'll move to number 3, which is workforce strategy update and power purchase agreement project selection policy recommendation. And this is going to be Benna, who will be leading us through. So I'll hand it over to you, Benna.
Thank you so much, Chair. Oh, thank you. And I am joined by Chris Van Vector and Britta Bradshaw from the power supply team as well. So I will go through the presentation, but we're all here to help answer any questions. So to start with, just as a quick reminder, staff has come previously to the executive committee to talk about our larger workforce strategy and gotten feedback to really focus our workforce development activities in our service territory. So our activities are primarily around building and transportation electrification projects, since these are local projects. We just added a little summary of the various things that we're doing on the slide. You guys have heard a lot about these programs. For example, most recently from Justin at our last board meeting about the contractor electrification training program, highly successful. And then the board has set aside $1.3 million to focus on workforce partnership activities that will really help support the Air District's upcoming rules around appliances. However, we recognize that one of the other ways that SVC supports job creation is really through the long-term contracts or power purchase agreements or PPAs. that we sign with renewable energy developers. So today we're bringing to you a formal PPA project selection policy. This policy would guide staff when selecting PPA projects to recommend for the board's approval. To level set, our current practice in the PPA selection process requires renewable developers to use prevailing wage, which can be satisfied by execution of a project labor agreement or PLA. So before we get into the details of the proposed policy, we just wanted to set a little bit of context. As you all know, we're in the power supply business, and this is a highly regulated industry. And we have a lot of regulatory mandates that we have to comply with. These can be often very complex and sometimes extremely prescriptive orders. We also at the same time need to maximize the value of these contracts to both help with affordability for our customers and to stay competitive in an extremely tight renewable market. We are competing in this market, the seller's market, not just with other CCAs, but with IOUs, municipal utilities, direct access providers, et cetera. The more we constrain ourselves to policies that other load serving entities like the IOUs and municipal utilities don't have, the more challenging the market is for us. That being said, though, we recognize that there are important policies that can be reflected in the PPA selection policy. So staff's updated proposal from when we went to executive committee last year really addresses several issues that tries to balance these policy objectives in ways that staff thinks are deliverable and provide us with the flexibility to deliver the best value for our customers. So the proposed policy that you saw in your packet covers several topics, including workforce standards, environmental stewardship, technology diversification, etc. Since we went to executive committee last year, we've had a lot of robust conversation with a variety of stakeholders in our region about the draft policy. So we've listed here some of the groups that have been participating with us. Really happy to have them here and on the phone today as well. We have very much appreciated the very productive dialogue that we've had with the stakeholders. You have seen yesterday that the stakeholders recently sent additional redlined suggested changes to staff, to the staff executive committee proposal, which you've all received. We have hard copies here as well for you to reference during this conversation. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the specific changes that we have taken so far to stakeholder feedback, and then touch very briefly about the additional recommendations that stakeholders have asked for. So we have taken a very wide variety of changes to the executive committee policy, draft policy that you saw last year. These include, for example, on workforce standards, we've added project labor agreements as the highest preference. On environmental stewardship, we added a preference for projects that are on previously disturbed or urban land. On community engagement, we added language to prefer developers that really do a good job engaging with the community. We added language about CC Power and how SVCE would use our board adopted policy to determine whether or not to participate in joint procurement at CC Power. We added additional reporting. And then the final item is a board direction from last November, where the board directed us to add a greenhouse gas emissions evaluation as part of our selection policy. As I mentioned, the stakeholders have submitted additional redline requests to the copy of the policy that staff has proposed for today. We have just summarized very high level some of the big things that they've asked for. This is by no means a comprehensive list of everything that is redlined, but some of these categories include local hire, so to include a 30% goal there, targeted hire with a 10% goal of hiring from workforce pipeline programs, adding apprentices to the medium priority projects, location changes. So the staff proposal currently says the top priority is in our service territory, and as part of the CAISO balancing authority and all other projects, the stakeholders have requested that we change the second priority to projects both in the state of California and in CAISO. And then environmental changes as well. about projects that are earlier in the pipeline and then measurable offsets. So we understand that the executive committee may want to change staff's policy proposal. And we would really, as staff, welcome very clear, high-level policy direction from the executive committee. If you would like changes, please express what they are in the executive committee motion and the final vote. And then as staff, we will take that policy direction and work on language. And we are committing to working with the stakeholders as well with our process so that the language is as what executive committee's direction is before we go to the board in March. With that, happy to pass it back to the chair for any clarifying board comments or questions.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I really want to thank you and staff and everyone for bringing us here to this point. I think I really appreciate seeing the partnership working and everybody here together. So to move forward, I would like to take questions first from the board, just so that everybody's clear. Once we get through those, if there are any questions, clarifying questions, then we will go ahead and take public comment. I understand that we have public comment. I also see that we have Louise here from Working Partnerships, and I don't know, I'm assuming you would like an opportunity to give public comment. After we've had the public comment, then we'll return and we'll have some discussion amongst us, and we can then go forward with any action there. So does anybody have any questions? Any of my colleagues? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So there's quite a few red lines, and a couple of them are just kind of semantic, but a lot of them are more significant. Does staff have a recommendation regarding these, or you're letting us just have at it without guidance?
Yes, we definitely have comments, and maybe I would suggest that we hold that so
Until
that.
the
because,
discussion,
like,
yes.
I do definitely want to give
Yes.
the stakeholders an opportunity
Yes.
through public comment to talk about what they would like to see as well.
And I think we should, I think if there are any clarifying questions, if people, have any questions that they want to ask on the redlining, or if something means anything, what we might think is that, I think we should go through any of that. And then let's have an opportunity to hear what are some of the important items that people want to discuss, and then we'll come back. And if you have more questions after, I'm happy to take those after. Director Fizzle.
Yeah, I had a legal question. So I really applaud the policy of the local and targeted hire. But my understanding is that the targeted hire, there's some concerns legally there. But my understanding, there are other CCAs that have adopted that specific language where you do include the targeted hires. So I kind of wanted to ask from legal standpoint what the reluctance might be, or if we can still incorporate this, because I do believe, I'm pretty sure SVCE is at least one of them that had this specific language, and maybe East Bay or Ava now as well, but anyhow.
I think there definitely are others who have, I know that some others do have language. But if we can get into the nitty gritty and the details, absolutely, when we come back, happy to take that.
During discussion, sure.
Yeah, unless, if there's anything specific.
Just from legally, I'd like to know what the concerns are on our end when it comes to the targeted hire specifically.
So
Yeah,
Mike,
no.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Chair, please.
Did you want to go ahead and address that now generally, or did you want to come back after? How do you think we should approach it?
I'm happy to respond generally on that topic. And, I can't get super into it because I want to maintain attorney-client privilege around sort of ultimate liability there. But, the short answer is that in the previous list, there were sort of various categories, and there was, a category at least that was concerning from a protected class and sort of equal protection perspective. And so, we need to be kind of cautious and careful about that as a public agency. We're, prohibited from discriminating based on those classes, including under Prop 209 and under federal law. So that's sort of the big one. Other categories may be acceptable, but to the extent that they're protected classes there, that would be problematic.
I just wanted to clarify that the latest red lines from the stakeholders are significantly different than that list that Mike was talking about that we had seen previously. So this language does not have protected classes of people listed, so it really is significantly different
Okay.
from that perspective.
Is that satisfying to you, Dr.?
For now, we can discuss more
Okay,
later.
perfect. Does anybody, yes,
Sure.
Dr. Klein?
So can you pull up the second to the left, or
Sure.
2 slides ago that
Oh, sorry.
you were focused on, sorry, whoever.
Okay, thank you, Andrea.
I wanted to reaffirm what, because this was different than the draft presentation, so I wanted.
Correct.
Yes, so I
That
wanted
is
to
correct.
capture, was it this one?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, it's one more
And
further.
it's this one and in the next one, or no, not this one.
There you go.
There we go. That's what I wanted to clear, just focus on that summary again.
Yes.
Now, from an environmental standpoint, and kind of looking at what they're suggesting, we're already, this is, if it's within California, it's already looked at from an environmental standpoint. So does staff have any feedback as far as the impacts, the local, mitigation of these projects and other things from an environmental standpoint? This is why we're decarbonizing. And so just interested in your feedback on goals and and how you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can start and then pass it over to Chris and Britta to add more details here. But you're absolutely right, Director, that there are rules and regulations in California that protect the environment. In staff's original proposal, we have said that we give a preference to developers that establish an enforceable development agreement, which often has the enforceable community benefits or the environmental benefits that the local jurisdiction, developer, et cetera, all agree upon. So that was our intent to capture a lot of that environmental stewardship and benefits intent in that language. But we do understand the stakeholders have asked for additional language, especially around projects in the earlier stages of the procurement process. And then more specific language that the developer commits to measurable offset efforts within the designated proposed project. So maybe I'll pass it over to Chris and Britta to talk a little bit more about what currently happens.
Chris or Britta?
Yeah, sorry, had some muting issues. Yeah, I mean, I think like you mentioned, it's largely required in California. I'm just thinking through various processes. I think we've largely accepted most of what they've recommended. Is that right, Britta? Sorry, Benna.
Staff is open to the recommendation language, yes.
Yeah. Britta, do you see anything on here that's different in our process?
Yeah, I think one thing I can think of that's different is, I believe, hopefully I'm getting this right, that in the, one thing that's different now on the environmental standpoint is that we may prioritize projects in previously disturbed sites. So there's less of a concern with impact to endangered species or natural areas. But I do think, California does a lot to protect environmental issues. And so I think in a way that kind of acts as insurance for us that the permitting process won't cause any kinks in the road.
Okay, and I appreciate that because that's how I saw it, is it's kind of belts and suspenders from a California standpoint.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
And very cautious. That's all my questions for now.
Okay, anyone else with questions? All right, so if there's no other questions, then at this point, we're prepared to take some public comments. I would like to take public comment from the room first, if that's okay. So, would you like to, do we have? is that
Yes,
Louise?
yes, Louise, I will have you speak first.
Good morning.
So I'm Louisa Orhan with Working Partnerships. And we are a community organization here in Santa Clara County. And we work to lift up the voices of all of our region's diverse communities on the issues that impact them. So from housing to public health and environment to good jobs and economic justice, and all of these intersecting issues. So I'm here speaking on this item today because one of my longtime focus areas is construction careers. I've worked on project labor agreement and targeted hiring policies at various local jurisdictions and founded the Trades Orientation Program, which is a pre-apprenticeship program where we've prepared and supported over 600 community members so far on the pathway into apprenticeship and family supporting construction careers. And we're enrolling now, by the way, if you know anyone looking for one of those. But these power purchase agreements and this policy are really exciting because these are enormous projects that offer tremendous opportunities to create thousands more of these high road construction careers for California. And careers doing something that we really badly need, creating more clean energy to power our neighborhoods. But we all know, like these, making sure these are good jobs, making sure they're open to the community, making sure the energy is clean energy, none of that happens automatically. It takes a lot of work, intentional goal setting, evaluation, ongoing oversight. And in my work, I've also seen what happens when you don't have that and market segments where construction ends up being a race to the bottom and we're pushing against, rampant wage theft, labor exploitation, health and safety practices, shoddy practices that end up doing long-term damages when things aren't built right. And so I've been very happy to see Silicon Valley Clean Energy over this past year moving forward with this policy that both institutionalizes some of your current practices around these solicitations and adds some additional goals and priorities. First, I obviously think this policy is a great step forward and support and urge the board to move forward with it. We've been engaging a lot with staff and some board members over the past year and have been really glad to be able to have that dialogue. I am asking for the addition of the elements that are recommended in the public comment letter, which is from the Workforce and Environmental Justice Alliance. And a few other major pieces. And again, it does look like a lot of red lines. Well, a lot of us are wonks, so we did get a little into the weeds there. There are really only a few major issues.
Yeah.
So first, in the first part of the policy, just clarifying that this is a best value approach by removing or modifying the phrase all else being equal. And second, the biggest outstanding issue is around local and targeted hiring, which we've worked on in jurisdictions throughout the region. It's been very effective. And I see my time is out now, so I'll stop and turn it over to my colleague.
Okay, great.
Sorry, you probably need to call me.
And we still have Lauren.
Lauren, and Lauren is with?
Actera, Action for a Healthy Planet. Everything she said. And, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak publicly in favor of staff recommendations. My name is Lauren Weston. I'm the Executive Director of Actera, Action for a Healthy Planet. I'm here today speaking for Actera as part of the CCA Workforce Environmental Justice Alliance. Actera has long served the same residents as SVCE and consider all of you wonderful partners in the work. Because of our collective work, I want to focus on continued encouraging and strengthening of ongoing engagement practices with the public. Transparency and early communication with residents is going to be a key lever in reducing delays and in educating the public on clean energy developments. People with the right information at the right time are strong, willing allies in this work. We want to bring communities together to support smart, responsible, and sustainable practices. All of this that's been referenced today has the added benefit of cost savings for SVCE and things like project siting and procurement. And I would be remiss if I didn't stress one last thing: local, local, local. We have stronger regulations in California, and it's an honor to say that, particularly now. I'm so proud of all of you. So please keep that up. Let's keep projects here locally staffed and locally trained for the benefit of Californians. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, now we'll move to online comments if there are any.
Yes, there are. We have 3, so excuse me, 4. We'll
Okay.
start with Alex L, followed by Eric V. Alex,
All right.
whenever you are ready. Alex,
Hi, I was muted, so hi, I'm sorry, my face popped up. That threw me off. Good morning, members. My name is Alex Lansberg with the San Francisco Electrical Construction Industry. I'm glad to participate in some of this process and some of these processes, kind of as I guess as a somewhat distant observer being up here, up in San Francisco. But I did want to commend you all on hopefully moving forward with this, and I'm really glad to hear about the staff's support of these modest changes. I did want to address a couple of things that I think speak directly to the goals that you are trying to achieve and why these suggested changes are going to be good for them. First of all, local hiring, it's not just simply a matter of delivering benefits to your local community, but it actually reduces greenhouse gas emissions because now you have a workforce that doesn't have to travel as far to get to these project sites. And, it's an indirect benefit, but it's a real one. Similarly, apprenticeship also really advances your economic goals for this. Something that I think a lot of people forget about is that apprentices work at a fraction of the journey level wage while they're in training, which means that when you put apprentices on your project, you're able to actually lower your composite hourly rates for the labor to do this work while also developing a workforce in an industry that, as you know, DC notwithstanding, that we expect to be growing over the next several generations. And lastly, PLAs are important. We like them from the standpoint of labor, but I want you to think about it from your standpoint as owners and as recipients or purchasers of these construction services, and that you can approach PLAs as tools to achieve your public policy goals. So things like local hiring, things like aggressive apprenticeship utilization, all these things can be spelled out through the negotiation around that project labor agreement. It really is a two-way street, and it's really an opportunity for public agencies to think creatively on how to achieve goals that otherwise might be a little bit tougher to get, especially within sort of a disorganized public contracting process. So thank you again for your time and for your consideration, and I look forward to hearing from other folks on the line here. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we'll hear from Eric V, followed by Will S. Eric, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Eric, are you there?
Hi, yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I am Eric Vium. I am the co-coordinator for the CCA Workforce and Environmental Justice Alliance. And we're an alliance of workers, climate environmental organizations, and environmental justice organizations working with CCAs to advance high road clean energy projects and local programs. I really want to start by thanking so much staff for working with us in a very collaborative and effective manner. Benna, Chris, and Britta have been excellent in their communications and responsiveness and openness to work through the gaps that we've had remaining here. Just a couple of things I want to share with this committee in terms of framing of why this is so critical is California has more than 175,000 megawatts of new clean resources that need to be built in order to decarbonize our economy. And those are lots of projects that CCAs, SVCE in particular, are going to need to build out. And those projects primarily are happening outside of your territory in other people's communities. And so SVCE and CCAs and everybody that's procuring clean energy have both and a responsibility to ensure that we are supporting and protecting workers in the communities that are hosting your clean energy projects, and also simultaneously from a position of de-risking these projects from possible development risk. After interconnection, community opposition is the highest cause of project failure, and all projects and project developers are not created equal. And so this type of thoughtful, proactive procurement approach is one that is happening oftentimes now earlier in the process, before projects are reaching entitlement. And so having this type of standard that sends a clear signal to the market about what great projects look like, and then holding those projects, rewarding those projects that are great projects, provide deliverability for and value for the CCA and your customers, and also support workers and the communities that are hosting your projects. Going from a position of community opposition, having this type of proactive policy where workers, environmentalists, climate activists, environmental justice communities are standing shoulder to shoulder, saying yes to this, where oftentimes there might be NIMBYs saying no. And so this is really about supporting great projects getting done for your CCA, and reducing those risks. And so in closing, I just want to refer you to our policy analysis, and appreciate adoption of all of our recommendations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we'll hear from Will S., followed by Bradley C. Will, whenever you're ready.
Will?
Good morning, board members. My name is Will Smith. I'm a representative for IBEW Local 332, proudly representing over 3,600 electrical workers in the wonderful county of Santa Clara. First and foremost, I just wanted to thank SVCE as well as their staff for the excellent coordination and cooperation into implementing these labor standards into this policy. My colleagues have basically stole a lot of my thunder, to be absolutely honest with you, between Luis, Eric, as well as Alex. But, I represent workers for a living, and something that I'm proud to do day in and day out. And I want to take it from the perspective of exploitation of workers. And so I'm urging this body to, adopt these standards to help prevent the exploitation of workers. A lot of people aren't aware that the exploitation, specifically of construction workers, occurs daily, not just daily in the United States, but it occurs daily right here in Santa Clara County. Typically, they like to exploit workers that are immigrants or migrant workers because of fear tactics of contacting ICE or of deportation and things of that nature. And so those workers in general are willing to give up their skills at a discounted rate. And I would hate for something like that to be associated with the taxpayers of Silicon Valley, because we're better than that. Obviously, being one of the top economies in the world, we are definitely better than that. And so I urge this body to adopt this policy and to move this forward. So I thank you for the opportunity. I thank you for the time. And on behalf of 3,600 electrical workers, we appreciate what this body is doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and next we will hear from Bradley C. Bradley, whenever you're ready.
Up there, I think I got the audio. Bradley Cleveland. I live in Oakland, and I represent IBEW Local 595, which represents electricians and electrical apprentices in Alameda, San Joaquin, and Calaveras counties. I want to echo what other folks have said, not surprisingly. But the high road labor standards will ensure that projects meet the strict safety standards that we need, the work is done right, and projects are completed on time. And as one of your board members mentioned, Ava Community Energy has adopted this policy, and I can speak from experience that the policy does work. We're already seeing some advances around local and targeted hiring. So we're having jobs for local skilled electricians, and career pathways are strengthened for high-risk youth and veterans, among others, who are part of our apprenticeship training programs. So with that, I just want to urge you to adopt this policy that will strengthen the high road labor standards, reduce development risk, and benefit vulnerable communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Right, and I see no additional hands raised at this time.
Okay, great. So thank you all for your public comment, much appreciated, getting that perspective. And now if we can just bring it back to the board for some discussion. And I will start with, and happy to return to some of the questions that you had in the beginning. I just want to preface it with saying I'm really impressed to see the work that staff and, and our and this coalition have worked together. I did also share a concern, an interest in the local and targeted hire and wanting to understand a little bit more also legally about what we might or might not be able to do. Certainly not wanting to put this organization at any type of risk, but understanding that it's important that we do what we can with what we have and taking that type of approach. And so I know that legal has looked at that and has shared that this language seems to be much more fitting and gives that breadth for us to do that at any time. It would come back to the board if there was anything, any question or any risk that we felt that the organization would be put in that we would be able to return. But at this point, taking out the protected classes and things of that sort, we're really looking at keeping it to a workforce pipeline of programs and using that to go forward, as well as with local hire, which I think, for me and my perspective does make sense with SVCE and our mission and our goal. So I'll also say to speak to the community engagement and, I guess it also does touch on local hire that we are trying to reduce our carbon footprint here, and I think footprint overall, and where we're not able to secure the resources of clean energy and points here in our local area. We do that in other communities, and I think it would be great for us to be able to look at our footprint there as well. And so local hire does seem to make sense to me in that sense as well. And so I've looked at all of these, and I do agree with Director Sally Meadows that there are semantics here, and I think that should be up to our staff to kind of go through and look at and see how they configure that. But as far as the, some of the overall, I think that these are, if staff is okay with this, I would like to see something with the apprentices. I think that makes sense, having them at the same ratio as a journeyman. I think, having the local in this workforce pipeline or targeted hire makes sense. I do think, I know there were some questions on location, but I understand that we as SVCE need to have, we have the Casio, which is different than maybe just keeping things in California. And so I've looked at that, and I think that makes sense for SVCE because that is our service territory. And so I think we need to have that flexibility to do that. And so, I love the point that Director Klein brought up on the environmental stewardship. I really appreciate that actually, because that wasn't something that, I pulled my attention to right away. And so I didn't see anything standing out. I'd love to hear from all of you, what your ideas are. But I, for the most part, would be in support of moving forward with this, with, again, the caveat of having our staff go ahead and look at that language and, if there are semantics that they want to work out. But overall, the big points here that I've seen change, using licensed electrician, I think those are all very important, and if, again, I'll refer back to legal, if that's something that these changes are something that our team is comfortable with, I would love to see those be implemented. So I would love to see if there's more questions that you have, or if you wanted to go down that I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
Director
Chair, I'm
Wong.
going to take it at a higher level. I'm going to take it back to staff.
Okay,
So the red line document in front of us is not staff's recommendation.
no.
It's not.
Correct. Okay, thank you for confirming that. So I'm going to ask you a very high level question. I have read very carefully the staff proposal and I deeply appreciate all the work that staff has done and all the input from all the stakeholders to present their case. So I would like to ask staff at this point, keeping in mind SVCE's long-term strategy, how we balance everything out, make sure our goals are met from all possible angles. What would you recommend? How do we go through this? I'm going to bring it back to you before I give my comments.
Well, I would suggest, Andrea, maybe we go back to that summary slide of the stakeholder suggestions. Staff has really tried to bring it up a level and talk about the high level policy changes that the stakeholders have asked. And maybe that's a good guide for going through this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Can you help us walk through that?
Sure.
Where are
So-
we?
Sure.
And
Sure, absolutely. So the first big category is around local hire. So the stakeholders have asked for to prefer developers that will commit to a 30% target on local hire. So on this one, as has the board and stakeholders have discussed, we know that a lot of the projects that we sign contracts for are not in our service territory. And then we know that the local jobs market can vary widely based on the actual location of the PP project. However, we understand if this is direction that the executive committee wants to take, we just ask that you make that very clear to us. Do you want to pause
Just-
or,
just
okay, keep going
I
on the
think
whole
that-
list?
That'll help me,
All right.
because I want to understand what our challenge is, unless.
Did you say a 30% goal was a hard thing?
I'll maybe pass it over to Chris and Britta, who have more knowledge of this, to chat.
So it really depends on location, is what I think Benno was getting at, right? I mean, if you think about a solar project out in the desert that nobody really lives around, it's going to be hard to hire enough people to build that project. But think about a solar project in Santa Clara County, it's going to be very easy to do, right? And so it's very project specific, is really how I would characterize it.
So if I were to, if I were to say that staff is already working toward the best possible scenario versus tying with a number, would that be more realistic, keeping in mind all the other regulatory and everything else that we deal with, the complexities all the time? Would that be more realistic?
Could I just ask a clarifying question? Do you mean that we would take out the percentage target of 30% for local hire? Is that what you're suggesting?
If I look closely, I don't
If
see.
we like that?
No.
Oh, sorry.
I'm saying I don't see that in the document, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm looking at the staff recommendation. The staff
Right,
recommendation.
the original staff recommendation before you today does not have local hire.
Thank you.
But what we're discussing is the stakeholders have asked for local hire to be added, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to clarify.
So for me, again, bringing it back up to the higher level, which makes perfect sense. Thank you, Chris. It's going to, and then after that, it's going to go project specific, what is realistic or not. So keeping the flexibility for staff is more important for me. Those are my thoughts on this one.
Okay, you wanted to go through the other
Why don't we go
areas,
through
right?
each?
We can go through each, I'm open to
one of
that,
it.
but this is the slide, I
Yeah.
think, where we need EC's.
Yeah, because this slide doesn't.
Hold on,
Sorry,
hold on.
Terry, yeah.
Okay, so you said that you wanted the staff to go through each of these groups. If you would like for staff to do that at this point, let's do that. Otherwise, if you don't want to go through the slide at this point, then I'm going to open it up to questions from everyone else.
I am totally flexible if, in a
So
way, what I'm hearing, Chair, is, and I completely support that we go through each line item here, because that's where staff is saying they want feedback from the EC members
Yes.
on these 5 bullets. And Benna and Chris have already explained bullet number 1, and I've given my feedback. I'm happy to hear from my colleagues, more than
Okay.
happy, and respect that.
So let's let's go ahead and go through the different ones from staff, and then we'll go ahead and move to if people want to talk about the specifics of them. Okay?
Clarifying
Yes.
question on this. This is a preference list.
Yes. Correct.
Okay, so if you have some project in the middle of nowhere, then in effect that nobody can use, then it kind of takes care of itself, I think. But what I don't know, what I still haven't gathered is, does staff, I think, frankly, let me just back up and say, I'm really pleased to hear the feedback from the audience, the public, and the things they said about the collaboration, because these sorts of things aren't always collaborative.
No.
And so I'm really pleased to hear a unanimity of the voice on that, because it doesn't happen by mistake. So Adeline, congratulations to the staff for that. And so what I think we're just trying to do is to find out what are the parameters, and you're looking for guidance from us. I think we're agreed, we're not gonna go through the red line and all that. So just the high level sort of thing. What we're gonna come up with as advice to you. And at this point, I don't know whether a preference of a 30% goal, put that in there, is something that I would recommend yet or not.
Okay.
So it's possible that you could say, we will go back and study it, because let's also put ourselves in the perspective where the executive committee, we're gonna give advice to staff, and they will of course pay close attention. They will. And then it comes to the board, and so we're not actually deciding today what we're gonna do. We're just trying to give a sense to staff so that they're not without guidance.
Yes.
Well, what staff is asking is for clear direction from executive committee about what additional items, if any, you want us to take from the stakeholder comments listed here. That would be the easiest for staff to understand, and then we will roll that into the recommendation from the executive committee to the board, and they will make the final decision.
Okay, I have a question. I'm gonna take Director Scazola first.
I just wanted to add on, my comment would be that I do love these percentages. I think they're good goals to have. But yes, I do want to make sure that there's at least a back door that's like, hey, we're in the middle of nowhere. We simply can't hire 30% local. There's a back door we can go through, but we do genuinely try to shoot for these goals, these targets. That's my recommendation.
Okay. And my comment would be that as well, I guess. I was gonna ask, you know, is this, as Director Tyson had said, this is a preference. It doesn't hold us, we're not beholden to it if we cannot meet that. And as Director Scazola is saying, then
it's a goal.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. I just also wanted to say from staff's perspective, we really want to make sure that we're setting expectations properly for the board, that when we set goals that we have good ways of tracking and enforcing and letting you know, and there's accountability as well, so.
Okay. And then that leads me to the other question for this point, but probably as well as the, you know, the workforce pipeline, is how, you know, along my conversations it's come up, how would this be done? And my understanding, and I want to make sure that staff, is that this would be done on part of CBOs. This would not be something the SVCE is having to do themselves.
I think we're jumping to the targeted hire.
Okay.
One, which is a little bit different than the local hire.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. I'll save that for that. Did you have
Yes.
a question? I'm sorry.
So no, continue with local hire.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's 30%. So going back to that, it's like from my standpoint, since we're kind of just taking everyone's comments on at least the first item. I'm not sure it's 30% is the right number. I would prefer staff to evaluate that from, is it 20%? Is it, you know, and we talk about preferences here and kind of continuing what Director Tyson said. You're going to have conceivably multiple bids with, oh, I have local hire, but I'm not dealing with apprentices, or it's a different one dealing with apprentices. So I'm not sure when we talk about, we're not ranking preferences either here. We're just basically saying in different areas, here's our preferences from a bid standpoint. It's up to staff to look at and council, and I'll go back to what was said earlier. I think I'm happier with the wording here if staff is, and I'll disagree with with Director Scazola. I don't care what other CCAs do. Our council is our guiding light, and if they say this terminology isn't enforceable or opens us up to lawsuits, that to me is higher priority than, if another CCA hasn't been sued yet, doesn't matter to me. If our from this organization, if our council says there's issues here, that to me is a higher priority. So I just want to reinforce that also from an executive board standpoint or from a board standpoint. It's making sure that we're not putting ourselves at risk for anything here. But anyway.
And that just, sorry, that is definitely why I'd like to know a little more clarification on that exact point is.
Right,
like,
which was your first question.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right, and I did have that conversation with council, but very much appreciated, yes, absolutely. So, okay, so are we ready to move to targeted hire? I think so. Okay, so let's, if we could talk about targeted hire.
Yes, so just to reiterate that the stakeholders' request has changed to targeted hire. Before it was a list that included specific categories and classifications of people. That is not what they're proposing today that you see before you in the red lines. Just to draw your attention, the new definition of targeted hire is on page 5 of the red line document. So just to make it crystal clear that targeted hire definition is really an individual who is a participant in a workforce pipeline program. So as I'll maybe pass it over to Mike again, but we want to talk a little bit about the legal issues around this new language.
Yeah, so the new language, again, focused on workforce training, workforce programs, is not problematic from sort of a protected class perspective. And so, targeting, getting folks from these pipeline programs is an appropriate way for us to prioritize projects in a solicitation. And so, from a legal perspective, we could adopt this if it was in the interest of the executive committee.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on targeted hire that we want to take? I'm not sure, you mentioned targeted hire in your comment, but I'm not.
So just trying to figure out percentages. So a similar sort of thing.
Okay.
Is what's a meaningful percentage? So it goes back, it's like whatever direction I think this board gives to staff, it's evaluating whether or not that's a meaningful number. Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 15%? Trying to give you that flexibility of making the right recommendation to the board when this comes back to us. From an MC3 program, is that California specific, or when we go outside of the state, is that even a reasonable definition? I'm not sure. So something to think about, not for us here, but for staff to evaluate further.
We'll take this feedback.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm imagining you'll be meeting again with our partner of coalition that have come together, right? And figure out, what are those baselines or what do you typically try to get and all of that. So that's great. Okay, Director Scazola. And then
Yeah, I just want some clarification. So am I understanding correctly that essentially right now the language is good? We have an ability for the targeted hire with this language, that there isn't a legal issue currently speaking. So the issue beforehand was that there was a list of very specific groups. Is
Yes,
that, oh,
that's
okay,
correct.
I see.
Yeah,
So
so that
that
is
no
not-
longer is there, but we
Right.
still have the ability to target. Oh, beautiful, wonderful. That's all I want to know.
Okay, great. Director Meadows.
Yeah, back to the percentages.
Sure.
I know it sounds squishier, and it is squishier, but if we don't know how realistic the percentages are, what about maximizing the hiring of these categories of people based on availability? If you do the work and determine that 30 and 10 are the right percents, then that's fine. But in reality, aren't we saying hire as many as possible? I don't get again, this is not my bailiwick. I don't know a lot about this area, so I will say that. But in reality, if we're trying to maximize, then can't we say that? And really get rid of what may or may not be a real or target.
I think one thing, how would we enforce that? How would we?
Right. Yeah, I know, but so maybe the measurement is why there's a number there, but again, how realistic, so.
Maybe
it's a
I'll
big
pass it
question.
over to Chris and Britta to talk about the evaluation in terms of how we measure this, and if it's easier to have, just did you meet this percentage or not versus something in between. Chris, Britta, thoughts here?
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll let Britta chime in as well. But I think having an actual target is a little easier to measure from what I understand. You get some metric, right? And then you can just move on to the next criteria as you need to. Britta, did you want to add anything?
No, I agree with that. I think we want something measurable. I think if it's not measurable and we're just saying maximize, then without any way to measure it, it doesn't mean anything.
It's harder for staff to do.
Okay, thank you.
So
Director
I
Tyson.
heard that, that makes sense to me, and I'm just gonna caution Director Meadows' comment. I don't think we wanna maximize. You don't want a project where it's 95% workforce, we want whatever the correct balance is, and we don't know what it is. So I think we should just recognize that.
So
Okay,
one
great.
quick,
Yes, Director Luffy.
thank you. So one quick thought on that. Again, I keep on bringing it back to my higher level comment that I made earlier, how realistic everything is, because there are too many variables in every scenario. And at the end of the day, we have to watch, and thank you for saying what I was thinking, California or outside California, but we have to report to the state of California at the end of the day. And so I'm not being very specific because I think there's a lot more that goes on to every single PPA. Perhaps one, and I caught that, thank you, maximizing. Maybe if we want to go in that direction, maybe give a range of percentage. I'm just thinking out loud. Would that be simpler? If we want to give a range from, say, I'm just making it up, saying 5% to 10% or 3% to 7%. I'm trying to find a way that staff thinks is realistic, makes sense, keeping in mind the overall mission and the fact that SVCE is minimizing the overall risks and financially viable in the long term.
Maybe we ask Chris and Britta.
Yeah, we should ask the procurement team, because what if you give a range, then what does it mean if it's outside the range?
Okay.
These are not hard targets, as I'm understanding is these are
Goals.
goals.
Okay.
So Chris, better, I mean, there's a lot of complexities in the bids we get, so.
That's right.
Yeah, I think our answer is going to be very similar to the last answer. It's really having a simple target. It's just easier to measure. Britta, any thoughts?
Agreed.
So maybe keeping in mind, or making it very, very clear, these are just goals.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
And I have a comment, and then I see a doctor. I really need to make that appointment. Director Klein, I'm sorry, it's on my. You're all doctors today. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I think it would be great for you to go back and understand, none of us are specialists in this. We don't know, what is the goal that we want to try and seek out on a project where, as Chris says, where it would be feasible, what would be that target that we would want to hit? That probably, sounds like a good place to start, but I'll leave that to all of you to figure out where that would go. Director Klein.
And so going back, kind of following up what Director Wally was saying. Dr. Wally, yeah. It's at the end of the day, this is procurement. This is a bid that we would get.
Correct.
Yes.
The organization in itself decides, oh, they met this or they didn't meet this. This is the best financial, it's a goal. So it's like 30, so one organization did 30% local hire, a different one did 20%. They can both bid and evaluate, and they have, some of them met a bit more targeted hire, and there's, all these are preferences, but at the end of the day, the organization is deciding what came closest to what our preferences were.
And there are other criterias.
Yes,
That's right.
right. And so there's multiple criteria here. Maybe none of the bids meet all of them, and so then it's the trade-off between the bidders.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay.
What's the best?
Just re-clarifying that point.
Yes,
That's right.
okay, and that's great.
And to build on that, we're talking about the criteria, and we're not talking about the weighting.
Right.
And that's very clearly in the
That
staff.
is staff.
We don't want to discuss that.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's return here. And the next one on our list is apprentices.
Apprentices,
Dinah.
the stakeholders have asked to add to the medium priority list utilization of apprentices at the same ratio of apprentice hours, journey people, et cetera. So
One week,
staff doesn't have any additional comments here. If this is what the executive committee's direction is, we're happy to add.
Okay.
So how does it impact?
Question.
How does it impact, when you're saying staff has no recommendation? How would it impact when you're going through evaluating a proposal?
So Kristen Britta can correct me, but we would look for proposals that also include using apprentices if you wanted to qualify for that medium priority category.
So it's a goal. Thank you.
But there were two aspects. It was,
That's right.
I think aspirationally, I like what I hear about the apprentices, but I don't know whether an equal ratio to journey people is appropriate. And so I would say our direction to staff would be find a way to get apprentice language in there that you can manage.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's what it is, because it says this is one apprentice hour per every 5 hours of journey work.
Okay, but I still don't know what the right ratio, what the
Yeah.
reasonable ratio is, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was going to be my follow-up. I don't know if 1 to 5 is a meaningful ratio. Utilizing apprentices at all, I think is positive here. Whether or not you force, whether or not the true preference is 1 to 5, it's making sure that at least apprentices are there. And maybe, and I always worry, in this specific case, specifying a 1 to 5 goal might actually make it worse. That it's like maybe they would get more apprentices in.
If there wasn't.
If there wasn't it's like, oh, we're only going to do 1 to 5. And conceivably.
Rather than a ceiling.
Well,
and that's the whole thing. It's like conceivably they don't go beyond this 1 to 5 because they've met the goal. Now, definitely having apprentices is critical, but figuring out what the right ratio is or whether or not that really needs to be a ratio. You know, I'm not as positive about apprentices as I am about, the local hire and targeted hire is much clearer to me. The hours of apprentices is a little bit different, but that's my take.
Yeah, okay, and I'm assuming because this is coming from, the Workforce Alliance, that they have a better idea of that, but I would love for you to go back and then, understand what is that standard and how that would be impactful, I guess, for us. So, that would just be, my comment. Yes.
I have a clarifying, thank you. I have a clarifying question. Legal and staff here
Okay.
is like, for me, and I'll make a statement first and then ask the question. For me, the utmost priority is the safety of every project and the liability. So if we specify certain things like this, these are aspirational goals. I want to ensure that Michael, you and Amartya, all the teams are very clear. Anything I say here, I just want to put that out up front, because specifying certain hours in addition to the point made by Director Klein here is also, I don't want to tie the hands where we are requiring certain things in a PPA in this complex world that could come back as a big problem for us.
I do think, if we're working with labor, I think safety would be one of the major things that they'll be looking at. And part of the reason for the apprentice, that I see value in that is we want to have more people who understand how to do these projects, because we need more clean energy and we need more of these projects. So I hear you. I'm hoping, and I would believe that, having the trained labor would be a big part of creating that safety for us. So, I'm hoping that would make our projects even more safe going forward. So, but again, this is not my realm. I'm urban planning and I'll stay in my lane a bit here. So, Director Meadows.
Thank you. So this is maybe more of an overall comment, and I know we're going through some other items, but they all feel common to me in the sense that, and I really appreciate that this has been a partnership working, but staff put together something and now we have a significant red line. Again, I don't have necessarily an objection to any of it, but I'm not the best judge. But I'm not getting a good sense of what you recommend. So I think the board is gonna need, well, they're not gonna get this, they'll get whatever then comes to the board. They're not getting this red line. That wouldn't, I think, be appropriate. There may be a new red line based on what does go to the board. But I'm just not really getting a sense of what your recommendation. I think you're hearing that from all of us. We don't know when there's numbers proposed, whether those are realistic. But I support the concept. I absolutely support the concept. But I think we have to monitor whether we have to measure trying to achieve the high road, which we want to achieve, against our mission. And if this prevents us getting the agreement, we need to look back a year or so, whatever time period later, and say, how did this work for us? And are we shortchanging our ability to deliver based on this? So I'm gonna be happy with whatever we come out with today that goes forward to the board. It's aspirational, but we have to judge it after we get some data based on it. So that's because with each of these is kind of the same, so I'm giving you my final spiel right now. Unless anyone changes my mind, right? Okay.
And I think that's a great point. I think I haven't heard any pushback yet from staff. I hope that, if there's anything in here in particular that you're not, I'm sure we will see that next, but if you could also share that with us here. But I do think it's a great idea for us to have another look at this, maybe after this has been in play for a while, whatever that point is that we want to come back and review it. I think that would be appropriate. Is that a year? Is that,
Right, okay, I understand. Maybe we can go through the rest of the list and we'll talk.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
So this next one is one where staff has continual disagreement with what the stakeholders have suggested here.
Okay.
So those, you're right. We almost got there.
Yes.
So staff's proposal is that we would prioritize projects within our service territory. There's no disagreement there. But the next level would be projects within CAISO and then outside of CAISO. So here the suggestion is that the second category be projects within the state of California and CAISO. So what we're really talking about here is that there's a sliver of CAISO that is part of Nevada, which we do have projects there. For example, Yellow Pine, that battery and solar project, is in Nevada, but it's part of CAISO. And the way that CAISO operates, all of those, everything inside that CAISO balancing authority is seen as one system. So it's very odd for us to say parts of that system are not preferred because it's operated as one. Chris, Britta, what did I leave out that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead, Britta, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I would just add that there are also projects that are in the state of California that wouldn't be a top priority. So if it's not, there are parts of California that are not part of CAISO.
Right.
So really just prioritizing projects that are in CAISO is, from a procurement standpoint, really is our highest priority.
Yeah, Sorry, the CAISO is the California Independent System Operator, is that balancing authority that manages all the electricity and makes sure that there's enough on there and everything works out.
Yes, it's the grid for us.
That's the grid, thank you.
Great, important point. So, okay. So basically, all of the state of California is not CAISO, and CAISO includes more than the state of California. And so that is why SVCE is asking that we want to make sure in our PPA agreements that we are covered within the whole CAISO territory. Okay, got it. Director Klein and then Director Jason.
Yeah, so for this one, I'm completely in favor of staff's comments. You know, I think
Sure.
it's our goal first.
Right.
And from a procurement standpoint, yes, we can go outside of that. That being said, that causes the whole organization more problems. So the recommended language here, to me,
yes,
from a higher degree made sense, but once you clarified that, you know, it's all goes to procurement and balancing the network. The CAISO is our highest priority. Getting more projects in CAISO benefits this organization, whether or not that's in California or outside, as long as it's part of that network, that's the critical thing. So yes, I'm happy with the original language here. I think that to me is the preference, at least in my opinion.
Great.
And I'm in agreement with Director Klein on that too, and just stepping back a little bit, in terms of regionalization, I still want to make sure that we're always, I mean, we still include other projects. So when it's things like New Mexico wind and diversification of our sources of supply, I'm liking that, what that builds, adds to our resiliency. And so that doesn't exclude that.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, that's great. And I think we're seeing a consensus of that. Would that be? Or this point on locations? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Director Scozola.
No comment.
Okay. Okay, so then we'll move to environmental.
Environmental stewardship. So again, stakeholders have added some language about projects that are earlier stages of the procurement process. We were having an internal discussion yesterday about just some of the language we might want to tighten up if the executive committee were to direct us to do this, again, to make sure that it's very clear what that would mean when you say, for example, that a project has adequately assessed impacts. We want to make sure that that's clear what that is, so that when Britta and her team do the evaluation, it's very clear what we are assessing. And then
what would that look like, Benna? You don't know. You would just go back to Britta.
Right, we would sort of have a discussion.
Okay.
And then the measurable offsets are something else that they asked for, which again, staff thinks that just having an enforceable development agreement already covers a lot of those items, but happy to follow the executive committee's direction on that too.
Okay, are there any questions on this, Director?
My quick thought is, again, it goes back to whatever is covered in the development agreement is good enough. Creating repetitive language in so many places leads to challenges, complications, and is at times not in the interest of the organization. So I keep on bringing back to my first comment, which was the complexity of what we do, our mission, and making sure financially and legally and in a regulatory environment with the state of California, that remains at the top for me. Beyond that, I will support whatever staff is recommending. And I, at the same time, applaud the coalition, that is the stakeholders coalition, for coming to us, taking the time and working with the SVCE organization. If there's anything else you need from me, I'm
gonna ask Benna, she's leading this effort. Is that clear, Benna?
Yes. My overall on everything, and I've been commenting on each.
Yes.
So thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, anyone else on environmental?
She said.
Okay, great. And I think, you know, if 3 is already, again, I'm not interested in repeating, I think that's covered. Number 2, I guess I would just say you know, you could have that conversation and see where staff falls on that. That seems to be, I'm okay with that as well. So, okay, now that we've gone, let's
I'm
step.
ready to make a motion.
Okay, very good. I'll just, is everybody, go ahead and make your motion. We'll take a second and then we'll see if there's more comments.
I move that we recommend that the SVCE looking for online. I move that we looking at the wording here.
Sure.
That we proceed with providing advice to the staff regarding the workforce strategy update power purchase agreement with the comments that we've given in terms of direction and advice, and bring it forward to the board of directors.
Okay, very good. I've got a motion from Director Tyson and a second from Director Valia. At this point, is there any discussion on the motion?
Staff just get some clarification
Yes,
about
you
which pieces of the stakeholders' comments you would like staff to work on and incorporate.
Okay.
So for example, I heard different kinds of things. I think it would just be helpful if we went down one by one. And if there's anything not listed in these major categories that were red lines in here that you want us to take, we would like some direction on that too. So for example, local hire, if you could just reiterate the direction to us.
The direction was to evaluate the proposed 30% goal and provide feedback to us on whether that number is correct, or there's some other parameters that would make it better, more operational and enforceable. And so I would say, my overall statement is to make sure that it's clear and manageable in terms of enforcement.
And I would say the same for the second.
And the same thing for the second one. And the same thing for the third one. Your direction, I think, was clear on the fourth one.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, I believe there was some sense that you've already got it covered, and we would accept that if that's your conclusion.
Okay, so no on the last one too, okay.
May I add something about it? If it.
Yes.
Yeah. That we emphasize, as I heard from everyone here, that all of these are aspirational and the overall. I just want that somewhere. I think it would be helpful for the board members to read that. Does that make sense to staff?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
What she said was that this
gist.
is a policy overall broad statement that's aspirational in nature, and the operations, we are giving staff the opportunity to the charter to define as seems operationally most fitting.
Got it, yes.
Very case by case, because that's what Chris said earlier. Everything varies project to project in so many ways, and all the risks, the safety, the financial and longevity of the organization, everything that I feel very strongly, and I'm pretty sure everybody here feels that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is.
So that's
policy.
the way, I didn't want to add the words, but that's the maker of the motion. I just wanted that be brought up somewhere. And I support that. And I agree with the friendly amendment as the seconder of the motion.
Great, thank you. And Director Meadows is pointing out where it
I
says
think
that.
in A, contributions, a lot of that language is already there. The very beginning of the A.
That's correct, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'll just include as well, I would like to include the license. Where did I see it?
Electricians.
Yeah, electricians are required, or where they're required, it says. And then also the 0.2.
It's getting a little in the weeds. Here, like this.
You think it's in the weeds?
Yeah, like this line, is that what you're talking about?
It's on page
Yeah.
If it's
3.
I don't want to go through all the red lines.
Well, it's required by state law.
So why do we even need to
Yeah.
list it?
And I think staff can.
Oh, I
handle
see your
that.
point. I see your point.
We're
Okay,
prescribing something that's
Got it.
required by state law.
okay.
Right, exactly.
Thank you. Okay. And then I wanted to ask on this last one with the targeted hire. There's a piece here that creates the opportunities for certified MC 3 graduates. So is that not currently included, or is that something we're getting?
We're inside that.
That's an aspirational statement as well.
From
Yeah.
what I heard from the action is that we would look at this language and then look at the target percentage and whether or not that was.
Okay.
reasonable.
I just remember hearing you had made a
So the
comment. I
question, so the
think.
question was whether or not MC3
Oh,
was the
outside.
right language
Yeah.
here and whether or not it applies
That's what it was.
outside of the state and
Okay.
so it's,
So you'll look at that.
yeah,
That's great.
it's, I think, from my standpoint, targeted hire was important. That being said, is this the right definition?
Got it.
It's staff looks at that.
Okay, I knew you had brought it up and I didn't. Okay, great. So, can we go
one
ahead
second.
and, oh, I'm sorry,
Sorry, no,
Dr. Spizzle?
just one more
Yes.
thing real quick, hopefully. I was curious about with community engagement on number 2, the specific wording, I know we're not gonna get in the weeds, but the project life cycle. I did like that wording. I'd like to know your guys' opinion on that, because the way I looked at that is that, anyone can go out there, do their bare minimum, within 500 feet of the project, here you go, one-time inform kind of thing, whatever the law is. But when I see project life cycle, I really like that because it, and these are aspirational, as we're saying, but it seems like we're there, we're committed, that we are willing to do more than the bare minimum. So I was curious, before we hold the vote, exactly what staff's thoughts are on that specific language. Just
Community engagement number 2.
yes,
right?
correct, and specifically the project life cycle.
We think it says the same thing.
Okay.
In our minds,
Got
but
it.
if that's important to executive committee, you can give us that direction.
I thank you for that comment. That's all I wanted to know.
Okay,
I read it differently.
very good.
I read that they wanted it to continue as long as the thing was operating.
Oh.
Yeah, no, actually,
As opposed to.
that was my interpretation.
Process, and I didn't know that I wanted to sign the
Forever.
developer up for that.
Yeah.
That there'd still be some kind of community engagement.
Not
type
after-
aspect
not after
the
it's up and-
completion.
Yeah.
So that is
That's what
something to
would be the
definitely.
expectation. Yeah, I agree.
Well, I mean, I guess you would hope that they would be a good community player, but I think for the PPA purposes, I hear what you're saying. I think for the PPA purposes, I'm okay with that throughout the.
As in the original or I'm more comfortable with the original. It's more
The original
clear.
language, I think
Much more
that's what
clear.
I'm hearing.
Okay, so are there any more comments or questions at this point?
Do a quick comment, just
Yes.
to reiterate, this is a procurement process.
Yes.
And potential multiple bids and all that. We're defining preferences, we're making, let's say, the board ultimately will be making preference recommendations to staff, and then that they are making the final decisions on these projects. So from a goal standpoint, there's lots of trade-offs. We're not prioritizing, we're leaving it all in staff's hands, much like the recommendations to board. So I think, this language is a positive thing for the organization, so. Thank you.
Yeah, and then right before, I'll also, be mindful that this is from the executive board. I'm sure we'll have input from our colleagues as well and our full board meeting. And so I'll welcome, to hear their comments as well. But again, I really want to thank, this is significant work that we've just done to get to this point. And I think it's really great to see, how this organization is just a testament to our public commitment. And so thank you to everyone for that. So if we can go ahead and take the vote.
So I
all
just
those in
want to, before a vote, that the motion is as stated with the slight friendly amendment I requested.
That's what actually,
Yes.
And not in any language that we are seeing here. Staff will work on the language.
Yes, that's correct.
That's the motion. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure,
Direction.
because that's what I
That's
seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, there you go. Great, so thank you to everyone, and we will now move to number 4, which is to recommend the SVCE Board of Directors approve the amended energy risk management policy. This is also an action item.
thank you to our guests for coming.
Yes,
Yes, thank
oh,
you.
you're leaving. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you so much. So for this report, we're going to have Amrit.
Yes, I'm actually gonna turn it over to Scott, who's our Director of Risk and Analytics. If you know the energy risk management policy, this is the policy that provides risk management controls on procurement activity, and this is something we update every 2 years. This time, we're updating it a little bit earlier than 2 years because we're making some changes as to how we account for the way we some of the risk exposure, make sure that we have all the adequate risk exposures represented in how we manage the portfolio. So I will let Scott go into the details of presentation.
All right, thank you, Amrit. Hello, everyone. Good day. We'll jump right in with an executive summary, and then I'll take you through some high points. We can have a little discussion. So first off, I want to lead with the concept of the PG&E PCIA as a financial hedge. This is a key element of the edits to the risk policy. We don't want to get into, in this setting, the details of all the analysis we did, but want to let you know that that analysis involved using a third-party model, NewGen solutions, to try to gauge the impact of the PCIA on a future-looking basis. We did a 5-year historical backcast that affirmed that relationship as a financial hedge. Our stress testing, as you know, in past years has accounted for this. And even our reserves demonstrate it because of how we've seen our reserves grow when market prices were high. So there is several evidences that went into this that were more quantitative and analytical. Further, it is important to understand that even though we saw some strong benefits from this dynamic in the past, that was something of I'll say, fortune in a sense, because of the fact that we were able to have a portfolio that was positioned to take advantage of. However, if the portfolio were to change in its position in the market because of low prices, there could be an effect that is the opposite. And so it's important that we think of it as a hedge so that we account for it in a way that will reflect results that we'd like to see. The other element to this is that SVCE effectively pegs its rates to PG&E right now. The board may change that at some point in the future if they decided to, but given that we use PG&E to understand our rates through a discount, the generation rate could also provide some level of hedging. We're still in an evaluation process around that, but it does move with market pricing, and we know our portfolio is exposed to market prices. So we're seeking board approval eventually with policy revisions that include but aren't limited to recognizing the PCIA and potentially the gen rate as a financial hedge, including the PCIA and potentially the gen rate in our hedge ratio calculations, and then modifying other certain operational and reporting requirements by moving them to a CEO approved set of standards. So I'm going to pause there. And before I get into more details, I want to give a moment to see if there's any questions just on this overview. All right, hearing none, we can jump right in. So overall, high-level recommendation here, we're recommending that the executive committee recommend to the board of directors to approve the revisions of the energy risk management policy. And kind of a footnote there is that key proposed change is the inclusion of the PCIA and gen rate hedge as we assess overall position. So what is the actual wording that's being edited? I believe that you all have received redline and clean versions of the policy modifications, as well as a staff report overview of it. And so there's lots of smaller changes, but this one and a couple others are worth noting here together. So where we say that we will account for net revenue risk, so this is the range of uncertainty in our forecasted revenues, we have added language to say, including any calculated financial impacts from the power charge indifference adjustment and any retail rates, indexed or other rates, and for components such as the PG&E rates. So overall, what we're saying there is those pieces contribute toward our percentage of hedge coverage that we have. Traditionally, the only amounts that we've used for this are PPAs and IST transactions that provide physical hedging to the portfolio. Further down, we mention the same again, referencing the PCIA and any other index as it directly affects our bottom line. And so we make sure we account for it in the second paragraph to be consistent with the first. We'll pause here. Any questions on this edit?
No questions.
Okay. Further, we have our net open position hedge thresholds that are addressed in the policy. These are the thresholds between which Chris and the procurement team aim to be in compliance with policy, so that we are at between, say, for example, the current balance of calendar year between 80 and 110%. When we take into account the PCA hedge, it will go toward measuring if we are within these thresholds. It does not change these thresholds. There is one edit that we're making here by striking the prompt quarter threshold. It's more of a practical reason than anything. Three reasons. One is what it's implying we do relative to the current balance of year is really de minimis in effect overall. The second is that we have found at times it creates mathematical problems with trying to hit that one and balance other periods that we're hedging. And the third is that in the standards, we anticipate that we will probably think about hedging on a seasonal basis for the next 12 months or so, and that kind of overlaps with a prompt order threshold. So we are requesting an edit to strike that and just continue to go with the 80 to 110% balance of current year. All right, the next slide. There are a few other edits that are worth mentioning in the revisions. Certainly this is not exhaustive, but it kind of hits on some of the highlights. So we've moved some metric definitions to the ERM standards. We've moved some operational elements to the standards. That is probably wise from a practicality standpoint. If we need to refine operational elements, it's not something that fits in a policy. It's something we should do more nimbly and under Monica's leadership to be sure we're taking care of things quickly as possible if we find a need. We've added references to that standards document in the policy where appropriate, so that we're acknowledging the existence of those standards. We have taken into account that under authorship of the policy, when Garish was here, there was lots of references to he, and so we are accounting for the fact that our CEO may not be a he, and they therefore looking to stay there. And then we are clarifying one thing. There's a section about authorized traders and the dollar values that they're permitted to transact, and actually new hires, myself and Colton, who's one of our traders, had questions when we read the policy, and there was some institutional knowledge that everyone was in agreement on as to what it meant, but our question elicited the thought that maybe we should just clarify it a little bit in the document. So we've done so to make sure everybody's on the same page there. All right. All right, so quick technical walkthrough. This is a refresh for some, probably for all, but the PCIA and the PG&E gen rate move in opposing direction when prices are high. So on the right side of this diagram, it's showing that dynamic. That would be when prices go up. When I say prices, I mean market prices. And we know that we benefit when the PG&E rate is high and when the PCIA is low. So when we're doing this, you'll see those two red squares, right? That's what we're trying to avoid in essence. And by accounting for the hedge dynamics of these two things, we're taking into account that, for example, if we think back to past years when prices have been high, our costs have come in higher, but our revenues have come in even higher than that, and we've seen inflows to our reserves. We're taking into account this dynamic on the revenue side so that we appropriately position our hedges. In other words, we acknowledge that this is going to happen potentially on a 1-year lag because of the true-up mechanism in the PCIA. But what it will avoid causing us to do is to only think physically, only buy power, which may actually create a long position or a lot of length for us. So these dynamics, when prices are high, there's a benefit to us. When they're low, we get squeezed. The gen rate goes down and the PCIA goes up, and that dynamic reduces our revenue. And that's what we're trying to avoid from a bad outcome scenario where we're put in a situation that impact to us is not accounted for. And then we learn of it too late after the fact. So, all right, next slide. So this is just a visual of what that dynamic looks like. And I'm going to talk you through this at a very basic level. So these are payoff diagrams. And I recognize the numbers on the chart are small, but really it's the trend or dynamic on these that is most important. So let me describe what this is showing, right? The x-axis along the bottom is market prices. So if we're looking at the first chart, that ranges from $40 to $100 in market prices. The y-axis up and down represents our operating margin. Now, this is from the perspective of only having load. If we were unhedged and we had no PPAs, no hedge contracts, no PCIA moving with market, and we just had fixed price sale load to customers, then what that would mean is that when prices were high, our costs would go up, but we would have revenues that were kind of locked in and we'd have lower outcomes. Whereas if prices were low, we would have sold our power to our customers at a certain price and our cost would have been lower. And so our contribution to reserves would be greater. So this is the same concept of any business that has a fixed price sale to a customer. In that lower cost is better for them. When we move to the right, what we try to do is we try to hedge our portfolio effectively by buying power at fixed prices through ISTs or PPAs, and we try to flatten our risk. So while the left-hand side is a hypothetical, the right-hand side is more illustrative of what happens or how we view our portfolio under the current risk policy, which is that we're slightly short. When I say short, it means we expect that if prices are high, we might make a little less money than what we might have budgeted, or if prices were low, we would expect to make a little more money. However, while our policy allows us to measure our risk this way, it's not what we've experienced, and it's not what our testing and analytics have shown to us. So if we demonstrate kind of the effect of the perception in reporting and risk management after adopting a revised policy at the approval of the board, we would end up at number 3. So number 3 would represent the same as number 2, but accounting for the fact that the PCIA and gen rate move with market prices, you'll see that we go from a downward slope to an upward slope. That upward slope is consistent with what we've experienced. Again, consistent with the testing and the analytics. And what it signals is that Chris and team might not need to buy as much power as they might otherwise think in version 2 of this chart, right? So they might procure less power, or if they had a lot of power put to them under a circumstance, they might need to sell a little off. And so what we would try to get to is number 4. And so once we implement this, we'll evaluate the impact from a practical decision-making and transaction perspective. And where we would want to be is somewhere probably flat, meaning our risk is largely indifferent, to being slightly long. Managing power portfolios is generally advisable to be a little long as opposed to short. So somewhere in a range that you see there conceptually in version 4 would be the effect of the policy change on operations and risk management. All right, I will pause there and see if there's any questions. Okay.
Questions? Okay.
Keep moving then.
Right ahead.
Yep, so what this will look like on a report, this is just a very simple example again. So today we see that we're short load, we're long ISTs, meaning we've bought power. So negative is we need, positive is we have, right? So in this case, we view our portfolio today, and we might report to you a 70% hedge ratio, where we're short 120 because we have a need of 400 and we've bought 80 and 200. So we bought 280, we still need 120, and we would tell you our hedge ratio is 70%. That would be a signal to you that we expect that we need to go out and buy 30 more, right, under that scenario. Under the lower scenario, we will create a calculation to convert the financial exposure into a physical representation in our hedge ratio math. And so what this would do is it would say, okay, if I had the same state of the world, but now I'm going to account for the fact that customer revenues change for us as market prices move, that is in this example, and this is just an example, that is in this case 180 megawatts worth of physical representation of that financial hedge so that we can calculate it into a hedge ratio. In that case, our portfolio is a little long, 60 megawatts long here, but we've added that 180 to the 280, and we're at basically 460 physical representation, and the hedge ratio reports at 115% instead. So you can see that movement of being downward sloping or short the market and correcting to be a representation that shows us slightly long. And then we decide from there how to manage the portfolio given the change. All right, and the next slide. All right, so from an implementation standpoint, with board approval next month, we would immediately update our reporting and position management to reflect this. We would continue to explore further the generation rate impact. There's some questions around that still that we want to answer before we would implement that in the position reporting. We would take into account these dynamics in any strategy compliance or overall portfolio management. We would circle back to the risk oversight committee on the outcomes of 1 and 2 so that they are able to intake kind of the result of the changes. And then we would continue to monitor some regulatory proceedings that are underway for the PCA and market price benchmark. And any of those changes that would be forthcoming, we would be prepared to incorporate so that we're not on a lag to changes that might be coming because of stale data or something like that. So this is kind of the after approval, what things would we be doing? The next slide. One of the things that is important and we just want to make sure you understand, I think this is something Monica and I discussed quite a bit. And that is that because the PCI is a financial hedge and because there's a true up with PG&E, let's suppose that we have a shorter or less long, either one of those, physical position on CAISO settlement. So the way it works today is we buy all of our load from the CAISO, and our counterparties to our transactions schedule in all of our supply into the CAISO. And CAISO looks at those two and nets them. They take the supply and the demand and they net them out, and then they look at how much money we need to pay them for our weekly invoice. And if that number starts to look like it's going to get too big, they call us and they say to Zach and Amrit, we need you to put more money in your escrow account with the CAISO because you have a certain position. So when we consider the PCIA a hedge, that CAISO is not going to view that as anything that mitigates our weekly invoice exposure. So if we're not buying all of the power, say, or we're buying less power than we might otherwise, there's a potential that there is a slight increase in this. We did this analysis on the past year, and you can see the lower orange bars or orange lines are our historical collateral levels. Actually, I did this over a 2-year period. The red line is the credit that CAISO gives us. So the CAISO says, well, if you basically $10 million, if you have a $10 million exposure with us, you don't need to send us any money, you're good. If we go above the 10 million, then they want that incremental covered. So you can see historically, there were 3 points in time where we would have needed to give CAISO $4 million for a couple weeks probably, and then they would turn around and give it back to us, because this exposure is measured on a rolling basis. So we want you to be aware that by adopting the proposed changes, there is some amount of exposure that we will have that will be a little larger than normal with the CAISO, and there's the potential, not the guarantee, but the potential under high market price conditions that we would need to post some additional collateral. There is no impact to the PG&E Polar collateral, and there is a potential hurdle that might come up if CPUC regulation of CCA hedging programs were to crop up again. It's been discussed in the past, and it's likely that that regulation would focus on physical hedging, and we would need to reconsider the operational approach to all of this if we were told by the CPUC that we needed to have 100% physical hedges with our CAISO settlement on a weekly basis. So that would mean that we would need to think about how we're considering the PCIA and its lagged effect on us, and how we might mitigate that in other ways. I think this is our last slide, but I could be wrong. Oh, this is a recommendation again. So basically to seek the board's approval on this next month and as a consent item.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Scott. Amrit, I saw you raising your hand. I didn't know if you wanted to say something, or were you just, okay, all right, great. Yes, I'll have a question from in just a moment, Director Klein. So thank you for that report. This is basically our energy risk management policy that comes back to us every 2 years. And so that's why we're having it returned now to take a look at it. This year, staff is proposing the inclusion of the PCIA and PG&E Generate Hedge, which we just saw. And so they're asking for our recommendation to the board, as Scott just mentioned, so that we can put this on as a consent item for our March 12th meeting. I have a question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask Director Klein, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Scott, are there any other CCAs that are currently utilizing this potential hedge or looking at PCIA and how that de-risks the organization?
So I'm not gonna name them, only because my knowledge, is probably, in confidence, but, certainly that there are some, yes.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And for me, thank you for the presentation. It's very clear. And what you're proposing makes total sense to me. And I'm ready for a motion whenever we get there.
Okay. And I also I have to look at this a few times, I'll admit. So, but what I took from it was that including the PCIA in our hedging will give us a more accurate, I guess, hedge. However, you want to be sure that we understand that there may be instances where we will have to put additional cash because there is going to be this additional stress points that we may incur. And that was what I took away from it. And so as far as, I feel in support of this. And I thank you for taking the time to go through and making this digestible, which seems so very undigestible. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to compliment, I can only imagine the huge body of work that this took to condense this into what is a more and more clear presentation every time I hear it. Not because the presentation changes, but because more pieces click in my mind. So I just, again, significant body of work. This is, consent is probably good because first time, if you haven't heard it before, it's really hard to digest, and I fully support it too. So thank you for the work.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, can I get a motion and a second? Oh, sorry about that. That's right. So if we'll go ahead and move and take public comment.
No hands raised for this item, Chair.
Okay, great. So we'll right back here. We'll close public comment. Any discussion?
Yeah, the motion.
Okay, then we'll take the motion from Director Klein. Do you have a second?
I'll move to recommend that the Board of Directors approve the revisions to the SVCE Energy Risk Management Policy and put this on consent at our next meeting. And also make sure that this presentation is part of that consent calendar item. I do think it's very educational for the rest of our board.
I second that, and I compliment the staff. Scott, that's the first time I'm seeing this, and you made it quite digestible. And I really appreciate that. You walked us through that in a manner that is quite easy to comprehend to the extent a non-risk person can. And I agree with the motion, including the presentation and the consent for the board members is important.
Very. Okay, thank you, Director Walia. And then can we have a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes overwhelming. And so we'll move
We'll do a time check. So there's one informational item.
Okay.
If the committee wants, we can definitely go forward with it. Or if you want to refer to another meeting, we can definitely do that as well.
We're at
5 minutes or so, right?
Yeah,
What's
it's a
that?
5-minute.
5 minutes.
How is everybody?
5 minutes, that's fine.
Are you okay? Okay, so it looks like we've got approval.
Okay, real quick, light and fun, I'm introducing this item. Okay, so good afternoon, Pamela Leonard, Deputy Director of Marketing and Communications. I'm introducing Leslie Mettering, who's gonna give, she's a Senior Marketing Specialist on my team and the owner of All Things eHub, which has been our highly successful national award-winning service to our customers that allows them to learn about electrification as well as take action in our programs. And it got a major new facelift, led by Leslie. So Leslie, take it away.
All right, Leslie.
Hello, Executive Committee. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Pam, for the beautiful intro. And I'll try to keep energies up, and I'll hopefully you won't be thinking about food.
Can't smell it yet.
All right, to get started, eHub started because many residential customers were interested in making climate positive choices However, we recognize that people have different circumstances and distinct needs and interests, and sometimes they just don't know where to start. And so that's why eHub became a one-stop shop to support customers in their electrification journey. And eHub also allows us to connect with the majority of our customers in a digital space. So eHub has three key goals. The first goal is to raise awareness about electrification. And we do this by driving website traffic to our eHub web pages through various channels such as emails and ads. And since launch, we had about 390,000 unique engagements to eHub resources, which really highlights the growing interest in electrification. The second goal of eHub is to educate customers about electrification. As you can see here, customers are taking the time to learn the information we provide because the industry average time spent on a web page is usually 50 seconds. And we have a very good open rate, or our open rate is exceeding the industry average of 22%. The third goal of eHub is to assist customers to take action. So this is where the SVCE programs come to play. What we've done previously is we had promotions on the appliance assistant, such as $50 off portable induction cooktops, and it drove a lot of engagement and interest. We also noticed that the adoption of smaller appliances led to the adoption of bigger upgrades, such as installing a heat pump water heater. eHub is an easy entry point for customers, giving them the confidence they need to take advantage of our SVCE rebates. All right. So, ta-da! The new and improved eHub. So with these learnings, we improved eHub to better guide customers from learning to taking action by personalizing their experience so that they can easily explore options and claim rebates. If everyone's okay with it, I do want to show off the new eHub. Can everyone see the incentives finder page, or is it stuck on slides?
Yeah.
Good, perfect. So the first feature we added was the incentives finder. This is a tool that helps customers find resources and rebates tailored to their home type, interest, and how much support they need. And when a customer is interested in one of these resources, they can easily dive deeper and find the information they're looking for. The second feature we added is our home upgrades webpage, which outlines the 3 different upgrade pathways, since SVCE loves helping our customers, and we have 3 different levels of services based on how much support a customer needs. This page helps clarify their options by outlining the benefits of each service and the technologies covered. We also added a step-by-step guide for customers so they can make their electrification process journey easier. All right. So we also made improvements on the appliance marketplace, formerly known as Appliance Assistant. And customers can shop for electric products that are Energy Star certified, and then you can get connected to programs or rebates related to that product. So for example, the smart thermostat, there's a Golden State rebate for that product. And we also have other products here, such as the induction cooking, which connects into our SVCE rebate. Soon we'll be running promotions on smaller appliances to encourage customers to consider bigger upgrades. And the last thing I want to show off here is our EV Finder, formerly known as the EV Assistant. So customers are able to not only compare the new EVs to their gas models by looking at the charts and amazing calculations that the EV Finder does, but customers are also able to see which EV is available to them at a nearby dealership, which is a very new feature. That being said, and I'll let you guys, I really encourage everyone to look through the new eHub, but my last slide is just about how we are reaching customers. So we have a robust set of tactics. I'm so sorry, it's not full screen. There you go. We have a robust set of tactics to connect with all our customers, no matter how they prefer to receive information. Whether it's a printed ad in a local news, email, or other channels, our goal is to reach customers in a lot of different ways. So to the right is a digital ad that we're currently boosting. And I'm not giving a sneak peek just yet. We're gonna have some hot shelter ads. So while you're driving around, commuting, wherever you want to go, you'll see some other cool eHub ads. That being said, I just want to thank you all for allowing me to take a little bit of your time to talk about eHub, and please let me know if you have any questions or concerns.
Okay, wow, Leslie,
Yeah.
that is a fantastic presentation. I loved it. I loved everything that you guys were showing us and had to say, so thank you. I think it's really great to see the creativity. I wish I had this for everything, you know, that I need to shop for. I could just like do a one click and it tells me all the great things to pick. So I can see the effort that went into this. Congratulations. It's no doubt why you guys got that award. So this is amazing. I just wanted to, do you have like a button you can click and it goes to another language?
Yes, actually, we just launched that. So over here at the top of eHub, it's called the tone one. It just automatically changes the language you need.
I love
Very
it.
cool.
Wow.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, Director.
Thank you.
Question. When is this information going to the staff? I kind of know the answer, and I'll roll in my comment in the interest of time. I was watching this online. I was checking this out late last night after a very busy day, and believe me, I still loved it. It's fabulous. I've shared some of this with my city manager already. In addition to the prior presentation from Justin, so I kind of rolled the whole conversation, and I know my city is getting ready. So back to the question, when are you taking it to the cities so that they can implement?
So we, just this week, we do a quarterly digital media toolkit that is pushed out to all PIOs and member agency staff, so that they do have it. This is something that lives online that anyone can go and access our digital media kit. The annual community impact reports were part of that as well. So that has been pushed out.
Recently,
Yeah,
because it being there doesn't mean the staff is looking at it.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I said there are challenges, so you guys need to push it.
Yeah, we push it
Right.
in the weekly log as well. It's sent out.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is a great
And at the
point.
same time, if you can email us, the board, because then it's a reminder for me. I just have to forward the email as a reminder to staff that please do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, in further than that, I would love to get, if you could send this as I had requested for the annual report. I asked them if they could give me a post or something that I could just quickly post on my social media. That would be amazing, because then you just copy, click, and you're done. Because it does get buried, like you're saying, sometimes with staff when they put that stuff out. So it'd be great. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Director Klein?
Yeah, so as far as, so the great from a social media standpoint, what hard copies are you doing from getting the message out that this exists, you know, QR codes on postcards and all that? We have our EV Drive event a week from tomorrow, and I want to make sure that that's available, or that's, you know, it's tied to a certain degree, but now that it's going, you know, the next version of that's going live, trying to make sure that there's something physical for people to carry away and do this once they get home.
Yeah, we've had a printout at events where it's one side is our rebates, the other side is eHub, QR codes. Leslie teased the bus shelters that'll go out next month that have QR codes, and it's in multiple language based on certain areas of our service area. Newspaper print ads in all the weeklies. It also was heavily featured in our power content label that was mailed to every single customer in December. That's our annual thing that we have to do, but we get to put whatever kind of wrapper around it. So we said new incentives finder tool, use it. So we do try to cover all of our bases.
Just checking.
Steady drumbeat. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Wow, well that's amazing. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you for that report. Anybody else?
I'll take the blue ID4.
Okay, great. All right. Noted. We'll let
Noted,
staff
so
know.
noted, yes.
So noted. Okay, great. Other than that, are there any staff remarks or committee announcements, remarks, comments? Okay.
Quick
Yes,
comment. So, of course, I'm assuming you're helping out with the EV ride program a week from tomorrow. I have no idea. I know staff is doing it. Usually you connect up, so that's just checking. And then from a city standpoint, which is important for the board members, but especially for staff, we started our Peary Park Rides program. About 3 weeks ago, we have our official kickoff next week. It's a VIA service put together, managed by VTA, but it's free rides for anyone in a portion of the city from 101 to El Camino, so including this, Mary to Fair Oaks. We have our official kickoff next Tuesday. The grand opening of that, or the kind of the kickoff of that program is next Tuesday, but it's an EV shuttle, free to everyone, at least for the next 2 years. So
that is amazing.
yeah.
So the free part you said for anyone in Sunnyvale, anyone at that moment or a resident of Sunnyvale?
Free for anyone who uses the service in Sunnyvale,
In
That's
that
great.
area.
in that
That's
area.
wonderful.
Yeah.
That is
So it's
great.
point to point in that area. We have a state funding for a citywide shuttle that will figure out how the overlapping will work, but that'll be coming later in the year. But this is a pilot program for decarbonizing and getting people out of their cars and around the city. I've been pushing for 6 years now and finally seeing it come to pass. But it'll be good for your staff also, which is important.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thanks, truly.
Okay, well, that adjourns the meeting. So meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for being here.